They took an oath to protect and serve, to stand as guardians between chaos and order, to be the thin blue line that kept communities safe. But what happens when the protectors become the predators? When the badge becomes a license to steal, to extort, to destroy? When the oath is nothing more than words spoken by men who never intended to keep them? This is the story of Michael Dowd and Kenny Eurell, two New York City police officers who didn't just cross the line between right and wrong. They obliterated it. They turned one of America's most dangerous precincts into their own criminal empire. They protected drug dealers. They robbed innocent people. They became everything they swore to fight against. And for years, nobody stopped them. This is a story of corruption so deep it threatened to tear apart one of the world's largest police departments. A story of brotherhood twisted into something dark and unrecognizable. A story of how two men with badges destroyed lives, shattered trust, and nearly got away with it all. This is the story of the dirtiest cops in New York City history. Thank you to all our loyal viewers and subscribers. Your support means everything. We're here every day with gripping true crime stories, deep dives, and the chilling details you won't hear anywhere else. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss an update. Because here at True Crime Vault, we don't just tell stories, we uncover the truth. New York City in the late 1980s was a war zone. Crack cocaine had swept through the streets like a plague. Murder rates soared to unprecedented heights. Gunshots echoed through neighborhoods every single night. 3,500 murders a year. Nearly 10 people are killed every single day. And nowhere was it worse than East New York, Brooklyn. The 75th precinct covered just 5 square miles of crumbling buildings and desperate poverty. But within those 5 square miles, more people were murdered than in some entire states. It was the deadliest precinct in the deadliest city in America. Empty buildings lined the streets. Squatters ran electrical lines from street poles to abandoned houses. It looked like a war zone. It felt like a war zone. For the police officers assigned there, it was a war zone. Captains would take Polaroid photos of new officers on their first day. Give this to your wife, they would say, so she'll remember what you look like. The radio never stopped. 250 calls a month per officer. Shootings, stabbings, robberies, rapes, an endless stream of violence and chaos. Officers would respond to one call and hear gunshots blocks away before they even finished. 200 jobs backlogged at any given time. Young kids with guns, drug dealers with guns, people high on crack with guns, violence on top of violence on top of violence. This was East New York. This was the 75th precinct. This was where Michael Dowd and Kenny Eurell will become the most corrupt police officers in modern New York City history. Ken Eurell never dreamed of being a police officer. He grew up in Rosedale, Queens, Irish Catholic family, Catholic school for 12 years. His mother worked as a bookkeeper in Manhattan. His father swung a hammer on construction sites. They were working-class people who believed in hard work and playing by the rules. Ken had no direction when he graduated. No grand plans. No burning ambition. The police officer exam came up first, so he took it. He did well. He got called right away, before he even turned 20. And just like that, he was a cop at the academy. They taught him about integrity. Internal affairs officers came to lecture about ethics and honesty, about doing the right thing, about being a good cop. But the lessons rang hollow. The instructors didn't take them seriously. After one internal affairs presentation, an academy instructor looked at the class and said it plainly. You can go that way, or you can go this way. You want to be a successful cop. You don't go that way. The message was clear from day one. Cover your ass. Protect your brothers in blue. Don't ask questions. Don't make waves. Don't be a rat. Ken graduated from the academy in January 1982. He got his gun. He got his shield. And he got assigned to the 75th precinct in East New York. He was 20 years old, and he had no idea what he was walking into. Michael Dowd was different. From the moment he arrived at the 75th precinct, people knew he wasn't like other cops. He had a reputation. He was out of control. He did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and he didn't care who knew it. Other officers heard the stories. Dowd and his crew were dirty. They stole. They extorted. They took money from anyone stupid enough to have it in front of them. Most cops stayed away from Michael Dowd. They didn't want to work with him. They didn't want to be associated with him. They knew he was trouble. But Dowd was also good at his job. He knew the streets. He could handle himself in dangerous situations. In a precinct where officers depended on each other to survive, that mattered. That mattered a lot. Ken Eurell heard the warnings. Other officers told him not to work with Dowd. They said he would end up in trouble. They said to give up his car assignment if he had to. But don't partner with Michael Dowd. But Ken needed a partner. And Dowd needed a partner. They started working together. Hesitantly at first, Dowd would take Ken to bodegas for beer during their shift. They made personal connections. Same age. Both married around the same time. Both had young sons at home. There was something there. A bond forming. A friendship is developing. Ken's other friends were horrified. They begged him not to make it official. This guy is trouble. They said, you're going to end up arrested. This is a huge mistake. But Ken stood by his decision. He could handle it. How much trouble could he get into? All he did was drink on the job. Michael Dowd saw Ken's loyalty. He saw Ken standing by him when everyone else walked away, and he gave Ken his heart. From that moment forward, they were partners. They were brothers. They were everything to each other. And that's exactly what Dowd had been waiting for. It started small. Early in his career, Ken responded to a burglary call with Michael Dowd. A teenage girl stood outside her house. Someone had broken in. Ken and Dowd went inside to check if the burglars were still there. They weren't. The house was empty. Dowd asked the girl if her parents kept money or valuables anywhere. The girl called her mother. The mother told her where the money was hidden. Dowd found it, a thick envelope stuffed with cash. But the girl never got it. Dowd reached up, felt around, and pulled his hand back empty. Nothing here, he told her. They must have gotten it. They walked back to the patrol car. Dowd reached into his pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. He handed it to Ken. This is for you. Ken was stunned. What the hell is that? Dowd smiled. You didn't even see me take it, did you? Ken took the money. He put it in his pocket. He went home and put it on the top shelf of his locker. It sat there for weeks. He didn't spend it. He couldn't bring himself to spend it, but he didn't turn it in either. A few days later, Ken and Dowd responded to another burglary. This time, an anti-crime unit showed up. Plainclothes officers doing their own investigation. One of them found a massive garbage bag filled with cash, just sitting there in a closet. The anti-crime officer looked at it, looked at Dowd. Dowd smoothly talked to him. You're going to spend all day vouching that? Stamping every bill? Initialing every bill? Just leave it. The anti-crime officer put the bag down and walked away. Dowd went back. He ripped open the bag and stuffed $4,000 or $5,000 into his pockets. Then he called another officer, a friend named Chicky. He told Chicky where the money was. Told him to get there fast. Chicky showed up dressed as a detective, flashed his badge to the landlord, got into the apartment, grabbed the rest of the cash, and walked out. That night, Ken and Dowd split $8,000. 2 months of salary in one score. Just like that, the line had been crossed. There was no going back. Ken Eurell was making $600 a week. He had a mortgage, 2 car payments, a wife and 2 young sons. He was living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in bills, watching every penny. And Michael Dowd was talking about money. Constantly. Money everywhere. Money just waiting to be taken. Drug dealers with pockets full of cash. Brand new Porsches. Brand new Jaguars. All that money right there in the precinct. Dowd knew what he was doing. He was opening Ken's mind, showing him what was possible, tempting him with a life beyond struggling to make ends meet. Ken started to listen. The opportunities were everywhere. They would respond to calls and find drugs, find money, find people who couldn't go to the police even if they wanted to, people who were criminals themselves. And slowly, methodically, Ken started talking. He started stealing from crime scenes, started shaking down drug dealers, started looking at every call as a potential score instead of a case to solve. Michael Dowd had corrupted him completely. They graduated from small thefts to organized robberies. They would get information about drug locations from narcotics units. They would stake out the places, learn the patterns, learn when money is moving in and out, learn who was vulnerable. Then they would hit them. Sometimes they went in uniform during their shift, kicked down doors, guns drawn, screaming like they were making a legitimate arrest, put everyone on the floor, take the money and drugs, walk out. Other times they went off duty, dressed like detectives, flashed fake credentials, acted like they were investigating a crime while they cleaned out stash houses. They recruited other officers. A massive cop named Walter from the police prison. Walter was 6'5", 290 pounds. A madman who would go through windows and doors without hesitation. They built a crew, cops working together to rob drug dealers, using their badges and authority to commit crimes, becoming everything they swore to fight against. And for years, nobody stopped them. Baron Perez owned an auto stereo installation shop called Auto Sound City. He had a beautiful wife, a shiny red Corvette, and deep connections to the drug trade. Drug dealers were his primary customers. They wanted 18 speakers, massive sound systems, the works. Baron knew his clients were criminals. His clients knew he was connected. Everyone understood the game. Michael Dowd saw an opportunity. He started spending time at Baron's shop, getting to know him, building trust, making it clear that he wasn't like other cops, that he could be useful. Baron was connected to a massive Dominican drug organization called La Compañía, the company. They moved millions of dollars in cocaine through East New York. They had supervisors, workers, and runners. They operated like a business, but it was a business where mistakes got you killed. The leader was a man named Cello, Jose Montalvo. He didn't look intimidating, but he was brutal. He killed people without hesitation, without remorse. He brought killers from the Dominican Republic specifically to eliminate threats. Detectives investigating the company knew they were dealing with something dangerous, something organized, something violent. Baron arranged a meeting between Dowd, Eurell, and Cello. Dowd laid it out simply. $24,000 down payment, then $8,000 per week. In exchange, they would provide information. They would warn about raids. They would make sure competing drug operations got taken down by narcotics units. They would protect Cello's organization. Cello agreed immediately. He wanted that power. He wanted to own cops. Having police officers on his payroll meant nobody could touch him. Nobody could touch his crew. He could expand his empire without fear. Michael Dowd and Ken Eurell walked out of that meeting with $24,000 in cash. They were ridiculously happy. Young guys with young wives and young kids. All that money in their hands. It felt like they had won the lottery. Ken's wife was visiting her grandmother in the precinct that day. Dowd and Eurell picked her up. She sat in the back seat. Dowd asked her to grab some beers from a paper bag. She opened it. Cash. Stacks and stacks of cash. She screamed. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Dowd and Eurell just laughed. They were flying high. Literally. Dowd drove over 100 miles per hour in a little blue Hyundai. They got pulled over. Dowd jumped out of the car before the other officer even opened his door. Flashed his badge. "What are you stopping a cop for?" Ken's wife sat in the back seat, terrified. "This is trouble," she kept saying. "You're both crazy. This is troublesome." She was right. The arrangement with Cello didn't last long. Money came up short one week. Dowd was furious. He sat outside Cello's drug spot for 4 nights straight. Lights and sirens. Chasing customers away. Harassing anyone who came near. Cello sent a message through Baron. "Tell that cop I'm putting a contract on him. I'm going to have him killed." Dowd found Cello the next day. Pulled him over. Threw his license and registration back in his face. "You're going to have me killed? Get out of your car right now. We'll do a 20-pace walk-off and see who wins. You owe me money and you put a hit on me?" Cello backed down immediately. Called off the hit. Sent $700 as an apology. But Dowd was done with him. Barron had a better connection anyway. A man named Adam Diaz. A bigger player. More money. More power. More opportunities. Adam Diaz ran multiple drug locations across East New York. Grocery stores where customers could buy cereal or 10 kilos of cocaine. Walk to the back. Knock on a metal door. Hand over money. Walk out with groceries, hiding kilos underneath. He had Colombian connections. Direct pipeline to massive quantities of cocaine. He was moving a serious weight, making serious money. Barron set up the meeting. Dowd demanded $25,000 down payment, then $8,000 per week. Adam agreed without hesitation. Dowd and Eurell now had a new boss. And this time, the arrangement was even more brazen. Adam would move money and drugs at the end of the day. Dowd and Eurell would follow in their marked patrol car, a police escort, protection from robbery, a message to anyone watching that Adam Diaz had juice, that he was untouchable. Dowd got Adam bulletproof vests, real police vests from department storage. Adam's crew wore them with pride, like badges of honor, proof that they had cops in their pocket. When competitors tried to set up shop too close to Adam's locations, Dowd would park a patrol car right on the corner. Customers would see the police and stay away. Competition eliminated without firing a shot. When narcotics units planned raids on Adam's locations, Dowd and Eurell would find out. They would warn Adam. His crew would clear out, take all the drugs with them, lock up the store. Narcotics would raid an empty building. No drugs, no evidence, no arrests, just frustration and confusion. Adam Diaz was operating with complete impunity, and Michael Dowd was making it possible. The money was flowing, $8,000 a week, every week, like clockwork. Barron would call on Tuesday. Your money's here. Dowd and Eurell would stop by Auto Sound City and pick it up. They were making more from drug dealers than from the police department. They forgot to pick up their paychecks. The money didn't matter anymore. It was nothing compared to what they were pulling in from corruption. Ken's lifestyle changed completely. Trips, jewelry, vacations, new furniture, new appliances, everything paid in cash. His paycheck just covered the mortgage and car payments. Everything else was dirty money. Michael Dowd bought a brand new 1987 Corvette. Bright red, impossible to miss. Every cop in the precinct told him not to bring it to work. You can't afford that car on a cop salary. It's too obvious. Don't drive it to the precinct. The next day, Dowd drove the Corvette to the precinct. He didn't care. He didn't care what anyone thought. He didn't care about getting caught. He felt invincible. Ken sat in that Corvette during their shifts, mortified. Everyone was looking at them. Everyone knew something was wrong. But nobody did anything about it, because cops don't turn in other cops. Even when the cop is drinking on duty. Even when he's doing lines of cocaine in the patrol car. Even when he's a fall-down drunk driving a car he couldn't possibly afford. Even then, they stayed silent. Because in the police culture, being good meant never giving up another cop. No matter what. No matter how bad it got. The blue wall of silence protected everyone. Even the criminals wearing badges. Michael Dowd was spiraling. He was heavily addicted to cocaine. Heavily addicted to alcohol. He was paranoid, erratic, increasingly reckless. But he kept going. Keep stealing. Keep robbing. Kept crossing every line there was to cross. And Ken Eurell followed him every step of the way. They had no idea they were being watched. Federal agents had been investigating La Compañía and Adam Diaz for years. They had informants inside the organizations. They had surveillance on Auto Sound City. They had wiretaps on phones. And they had Michael Dowd and Ken Eurell on tape. A detective named Joey Hall was investigating the company's murder operation. He was building cases, following leads, and he kept hearing about cops on the take. Cops protecting drug dealers. Specifically, a cop named Mike who drove a red Corvette. Hall called Internal Affairs, told them what he had heard. They said they would look into it. But nothing happened. Nothing changed. Dowd and Eurell kept operating with impunity. An Internal Affairs investigator went to the 75th Precinct to get documents. As he walked in the back door, Michael Dowd walked out. They passed each other, made eye contact. The investigator felt it immediately. This guy is a perp. Everything about him screamed criminal, but he was wearing a uniform. He was a cop. The investigator started following them. Surveillance, watching their movements, trying to catch them in the act. But Dowd was smart. He would run every red light leaving the precinct, constantly checking his mirrors, looking for tails, making surveillance nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Dowd and Eurell had expanded into cocaine distribution. They were buying large quantities from Barron and Adam, selling it themselves out on Long Island. $50 envelopes, moving weight through a dealer named Harry. An undercover officer named Brian made his first cocaine purchase from Harry in January 1992. The cocaine came back 95% pure. That level of purity meant someone had serious connections. Direct pipeline to Colombian suppliers. Brian kept buying, building a case, getting closer to the source, getting closer to Michael Dowd. The walls were closing in, but Dowd still felt invincible, still felt untouchable. That delusion was about to be shattered. Sunday morning, May 1992, Ken Eurell packed his kids in the car, heading to his parents' house for breakfast. Normal family day. Nothing unusual, except for the white car sitting on the corner. Someone inside, watching, waiting. Ken's wife saw it immediately. "Mike, did you see that?" Ken watched his rear view mirror as he drove away. The car pulled out, started following. Ken's heart started racing, but he wasn't too worried. No cocaine in the house. No evidence. They couldn't prove anything. His wife was terrified. "Ken, they don't need cocaine in the house to bust you. They have enough already." She was right. That evening, Ken was at home. He saw cars following him. Multiple vehicles. Unmarked. He knew something was wrong. Michael Dowd had the same experience. He went to the precinct for his shift, walked up the steps, felt tension everywhere. The desk officer pointed him toward the captain. A man with a lieutenant's badge walked up. "Internal affairs. We need you to take a drug test." Within minutes, Suffolk County Narcotics raided Ken's house. Helmets, vests, shields. They threw him against the wall, pulled his gun, cuffed him, searched his pockets. They found the cocaine Ken was trying to unload. Dowd went to change in the locker room. Plainclothes officers surrounded him. Suffolk County Police. "You're under arrest for narcotics conspiracy." One by one, the crew got swept up. 6 New York City police officers arrested, charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine. The media went crazy. Cops arrested on corruption charges. Again, it was becoming a familiar story in New York. But this case was different. This case involved Michael Dowd. He was dirty up to his eyeballs, the most corrupt cop in modern history, and he had finally been caught. They were out on bail, facing 25 years to life. State drug trafficking charges. Their lives were over. Their careers were over. Everything was collapsing. Michael Dowd started making plans. Wild plans. Desperate plans. Plans that revealed just how far gone he really was. A Colombian was staying at his house. The man owed money to another drug dealer. The dealer's wife was holding cash and cocaine at a house in Queens. A lot of cash. A lot of cocaine. Dowd came up with a scheme. They would grab the wife, kidnap her, take the money and drugs, then turn her over to the Colombians for execution. Murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, fleeing bail. It was insane. Completely insane. But Dowd was serious. He brought the plan to Ken. "Are you in or are you out?" Ken said he was in. They drove to the house in Queens, turned on a police scanner to monitor local activity. Within a minute, they heard it. Suspicious car on Avon Street. The block was staked out. Someone had tipped off law enforcement. They got out of there fast. Cars converged from everywhere as they drove away. Ken went home. His wife told him something strange. Dowd's wife had called the night before. She said, "If you never see me again, remember I love both you and Mike." Ken realized what was happening. The feds knew about the plan. They knew everything. And it was time to make a choice. Work with law enforcement or go down with Michael Dowd. Ken's lawyer laid it out simply. This wasn't just state charges anymore. The feds had been investigating for years. They had Baron Perez. They had Adam Diaz. They had surveillance. They had wiretaps. They had everything. Ken was looking at decades in federal prison, decades away from his wife and sons, decades for crimes he never would have committed if he hadn't met Michael Dowd. His lawyer told him what he had to do. Give up Dowd. Cooperate with the DEA. It was the only way. Ken agreed. They gave him a wire, a recorder that he strapped to his calf with an ace bandage. They tapped his phone. Every interaction with Dowd had to be recorded. Ken called Dowd. They talked about the kidnapping plan, about grabbing the woman, about how they would do it, all of it on tape. The plan was for Dowd to go to the house in Queens. Federal agents would be there. They would arrest him. They would arrest Ken too, to make it look like he wasn't cooperating. Then they would take Ken's wife and kids somewhere safe. But it didn't work out that way. Surveillance got burned. Someone called the police about a suspicious car. The whole operation fell apart. Dowd and Ken went back to Ken's house. Dowd was suspicious. Something wasn't right. Why was Ken's wife acting strange? Where was all the furniture? Ken's wife had been ready to run. Bags packed, waiting for the DEA to take her to safety. When she saw Dowd's car pull up, she panicked, hid the bags, ran to the bathroom, wet her hair to make it look like she just got out of the shower. Dowd looked around, asking questions, sensing something was wrong. But he left, went home, didn't realize his best friend had just betrayed him. Hours later, federal agents surrounded Dowd's house. Kids playing in the street ran to tell him. Vehicles coming into the cul-de-sac. Michael Dowd was arrested for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder, arrested by the federal government, facing life in prison. He couldn't believe it, couldn't understand how they knew about the plan. Only one person could have told them. Kenny Eurell, his partner, his brother, the man he trusted more than anyone in the world. Kenny had turned on him. Kenny Eurell's testimony sent shockwaves through the New York City Police Department. He detailed everything. The robberies, the drug dealing, the protection racket, the systematic corruption that had infected the 75th Precinct for years. The Mullen Commission was formed to investigate police corruption. Michael Dowd was called to testify, under oath, in front of cameras, in front of the world. He admitted to hundreds of crimes: theft, extortion, drug trafficking, protecting drug operations, personal drug use, hundreds of violations of his oath, hundreds of betrayals of public trust. Commissioners asked him directly, "Who did you consider your primary employer? The police department that gave you your badge? Or the drug traffickers who paid you because of it?" Dowd's answer was chilling. He considered himself both a cop and a gangster. He saw no contradiction. He felt no shame. The investigation revealed that the NYPD's anti-corruption apparatus was reactive, not proactive. They relied on complaints instead of actively seeking out corruption, which meant the majority of corrupt acts went undetected and uninvestigated. The blue wall of silence had protected Michael Dowd for years. Other officers knew what he was doing. Supervisors knew something was wrong. But nobody spoke up. Nobody reported him. Nobody stopped him. Because cops don't turn in other cops. Michael Dowd was sentenced to 16 years in federal prison. Ken Eurell received a significantly reduced sentence for his cooperation. The other members of their crew received various sentences. Baron Perez and Adam Diaz were prosecuted. La Compañía was dismantled, but the damage had already been done. The drugs had already been sold. The violence had already occurred. The trust had already been shattered. Ken Eurell lives with his choice every day. He saved a woman's life by turning in Michael Dowd. He stopped a kidnapping and murder. He cooperated with law enforcement and helped dismantle criminal organizations. But in the culture he came from, he's a rat. The worst thing a cop can be. He says he has no regrets. He didn't have to look over his shoulder. Nobody was going to hurt him for what he did. He could live with himself. But he also says he regrets ever meeting Michael Dowd. That first $100 bill, that first moment of corruption. If he could go back, he would have gone to an outside agency, not internal affairs. not his supervisors. An outside agency that could actually do something. Michael Dowd served his time, got out of prison. He doesn't call Ken a rat. He just says Ken turned, did what he had to do, made his choice. Dowd says he could have done the same thing, could have cooperated, could have given everyone up to save himself. But he didn't. He took his punishment. He lived with his choices. He also says he has no regrets about not turning. No worries about people wanting revenge. Nobody's going to come after him for keeping his mouth shut. But there's a coldness in his voice, a distance. The brotherhood he once valued above everything else was destroyed by his own actions, by his own corruption, by his own selfishness. The 75th Precinct changed after the scandal. Reforms were implemented. Anti-corruption measures were strengthened. The department tried to ensure something like this could never happen again. But the fundamental problem remained. The blue wall of silence. The code that says you never turn on another cop, never report, never cooperate, never tell the truth if it hurts one of your own. That code protected Michael Dowd for years. That code allowed him to rob, steal, and destroy with impunity. That code nearly allowed him to commit kidnapping and murder. And that code still exists today. It's easy to forget the real victims in this story. Michael Dowd and Ken Eurell like to think they only hurt drug dealers, only taken from criminals, only stole from people who had it coming. But that's a lie, a comfortable lie. They told themselves to justify their actions. The drugs they protected flooded into East New York, into one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, into communities that were already suffering, already struggling, already desperate. That cocaine destroyed families, ruined lives, killed people. The money Michael Dowd counted in his living room represented untold human suffering, addiction, violence, death. The people of East New York depended on police officers to protect them, to keep them safe, to stand between them and the criminals trying to destroy their neighborhood. Instead, they got Michael Dowd, a cop who made everything worse, who helped the drug dealers, who took money to let poison flow through the streets. How many people died because Michael Dowd protected drug operations? How many lives were ruined? How many families are torn apart? How much suffering can be directly attributed to his corruption? We'll never know the full count, never know the complete cost. But the number is not zero. The harm is not theoretical. It's real. It's devastating. It's permanent. And Michael Dowd doesn't seem to care. Ken Eurell says something haunting near the end of his testimony. Something that reveals the tragedy at the heart of this story. He wanted to be a good cop. He didn't join the police department to be corrupt. He didn't take the oath planning to violate it. He had dreams about being a good cop, but it never happened. That's the real tragedy. Not that Ken Eurell became corrupt, but he wanted to be good and failed. That the culture around him, the pressure, the money, the influence of Michael Dowd pulled him away from who he wanted to be. There's a moment early in Ken's career, that first $100 bill, sitting on top of his locker. He couldn't spend it, couldn't bring himself to use it, because some part of him still knew it was wrong. But he also couldn't turn it in, couldn't report Michael Dowd, couldn't break the code, couldn't be a rat. So the money sat there, a symbol of his corruption, a reminder of his choice, a marker of the moment his career as a real police officer ended. If Ken had made a different choice that day, everything would have been different. Michael Dowd would have been investigated, would have been stopped, would have been prosecuted before he could do years of additional damage. But Ken made the choice he thought he had to make, the choice his training told him to make, the choice his culture demanded he make. He stayed silent. He protected his partner. He became just as guilty. Police corruption isn't new. It isn't unique to New York. It isn't solved by better training or stricter rules or more oversight. It's solved by culture change, by breaking the blue wall of silence, by creating an environment where officers can report misconduct without destroying their careers, without being labeled rats, without facing retaliation from other officers. Michael Dowd was able to operate for years because other officers knew what he was doing and said nothing. Supervisors suspected and did nothing. The system was designed to protect him, not stop him. That's the real problem. Not that one cop went bad, but that the entire system allowed it to happen, enabled it, protected it, facilitated it, until Ken Eurell finally broke, finally cooperated, finally told the truth. And even then, he's seen as a traitor by many in law enforcement, as someone who violated the code, as someone who chose the law over the brotherhood. That's insane. That's backwards. That's exactly the culture that allowed Michael Dowd to exist in the first place. The oath says to protect and serve, to uphold the law, to be guardians of justice. There's nothing in the oath about protecting other cops who break the law, nothing about covering up crimes, nothing about staying silent in the face of corruption. But that's what the culture demands. That's what officers are taught from day one. That's the unwritten rule that supersedes everything else. And until that changes, there will be more Michael Dowds, more corrupt cops destroying communities, more officers who wanted to be good but got pulled into something dark and terrible. Michael Dowd sat in front of the Mullen Commission and admitted to everything. Hundreds of crimes, years of corruption, systematic violation of his oath and his duty. He showed no remorse, no shame, no understanding of the harm he caused. He was cold, clinical, matter of fact. This is what I did. This is how I did it. This is why I got away with it for so long. Commissioners asked him question after question, trying to understand how this happened, how a police officer could become so corrupt, how the system failed so completely. Dowd answered honestly. Cops don't turn on other cops. The culture protects corruption. Officers depend on each other for survival, so they stay silent even when someone is doing wrong. It was all right there. The problem laid bare. The systemic failure exposed. The cultural rot was revealed. But what changed? What reforms actually stuck? What was different after the Mullen Commission finished its work? Some things got better. Some oversight improved. Some anti-corruption measures were strengthened. But the fundamental culture? The blue wall of silence? The code that protects bad cops? That's still there. Still strong. Still protecting officers who should be prosecuted. Michael Dowd destroyed lives. He helped flood drugs into a community already drowning. He betrayed everything the badge is supposed to represent. He was a criminal in a police uniform. And for years, nobody stopped him. Because the culture said not to. Because turning in another cop is worse than letting him commit crimes. Because the brotherhood matters more than the oath. That's the real scandal. Not that Michael Dowd existed, but that system allowed him to exist, protected him, enabled him, made it possible for him to operate with impunity for years. There's someone we haven't talked about much. The woman in Queens. The one Michael Dowd planned to kidnap and murder. She had no idea she was in danger. No idea that 2 police officers were planning to break into her home, to grab her, to torture her for information about money and drugs, to hand her over to Colombian drug dealers who would execute her. She was just someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's sister, a human being whose life meant nothing to Michael Dowd, who was just an obstacle between him and money, just another score, just collateral damage in his criminal enterprise. Ken Eurell saved her life by wearing that wire, by cooperating with federal agents, by betraying Michael Dowd before the plan could be carried out. And for that, he's called a rat, a traitor, someone who violated the code. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. The culture that calls Ken Eurell a rat for stopping a kidnapping and murder is the same culture that protected Michael Dowd for years. The same culture that allowed him to rob and steal and destroy. The same culture that values loyalty to corrupt cops over protection of innocent people. That's not a culture of heroes. That's not a culture of public servants. That's a culture of criminals protecting their own. The woman in Queens didn't know how close she came to dying. Didn't know that her life was saved by a corrupt cop who finally found a line he wouldn't cross. Who finally decided that some things were too far. That murder was different from robbery. That a human life mattered more than the code. Ken Eurell did the right thing. Finally, after years of doing wrong. After countless crimes and betrayals, he did one thing right. He saved a life. And the culture he came from will never forgive him for it. Can Michael Dowd be redeemed? Can Eurell? Can any corrupt police officer betray their oath and their community? It's a complicated question. Both men served their time. Both paid legal consequences for their crimes. Both lost their careers. Both destroyed their reputations. But is that enough? Does serving time in prison somehow balance the scales? Does it undo the harm they caused? Does it restore trust in law enforcement? No, of course not. Nothing can undo what they did. Nothing can bring back the lives destroyed by the drugs they protected. Nothing can restore the faith they shattered. Nothing can compensate the community they betrayed. Michael Dowd seems to understand this on some level. He admits what he did. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't pretend he was justified. He was corrupt. He was a criminal. He violated everything he swore to uphold. But there's no real remorse in his voice. No genuine understanding of the human cost of his actions. He talks about his crimes like war stories, like adventures, like something that happened to someone else. Eurell at least expresses regret. He wishes he had never met Michael Dowd. He wishes he had made different choices. He wishes he had been the good cop he wanted to be. But he also justifies his cooperation, defends his decision to turn informant, frames himself as someone who saved a life rather than someone who violated the code. Both men are still trapped in the same culture that created them, still viewing their actions through the lens of police brotherhood and loyalty, still unable to fully grasp the magnitude of what they did. Redemption requires more than serving time. It requires genuine remorse, real understanding of harm caused, commitment to making things right, effort to prevent others from making the same mistakes. Neither Dowd nor Eurell have truly done that work. Neither has fully confronted what they took from the community they swore to protect. Neither has truly grappled with the weight of their betrayal. Maybe that's impossible. Maybe once you cross certain lines, you can never really come back. Maybe the damage is too deep. The betrayal is too complete. The harm is too permanent. Or maybe redemption is still possible. Maybe it starts with the truth, with honest reckoning, with acknowledging not just what you did, but who you hurt, what you took, what you can never give back. But that's a harder path than either man seems willing to walk. The 75th Precinct is different now. Reforms were implemented. Oversight increased. The most egregious corruption was rooted out. But East New York is still struggling, still dealing with poverty, still dealing with crime, still dealing with the aftermath of decades of neglect and exploitation. The cocaine that Michael Dowd helped protect didn't just disappear when he went to prison. The addiction didn't stop. The violence didn't end. The community's devastation continued. Because that's the thing about corruption. The effects ripple outward. They compound. They destroy trust that takes generations to rebuild. How many young people in East New York grew up watching Michael Dowd and his crew operate with impunity? How many saw cops stealing and concluded the system was rigged? How many decided cooperation with law enforcement was foolish because the cops were just as criminal as anyone else? How much legitimate police work was undermined by corruption? How many real investigations were compromised? How many witnesses refused come forward because they didn't trust the police? How many crimes went unsolved because the community had learned that cops couldn't be trusted? The legacy of Michael Dowd isn't just the crimes he committed. It's the trust he destroyed, the cynicism he created, the damage to the relationship between law enforcement and the community they're supposed to serve. That damage is still there, still affecting how people view police, still making it harder for good cops to do their jobs, still poisoning the well. And it's not just East New York. It's everywhere. Every police corruption scandal reinforces the belief that all cops are corrupt, that the badge is just a license to steal, that law enforcement is just another gang with better PR. Most cops aren't corrupt. Most officers genuinely want to do good work, want to serve their communities, want to live up to the oath they took. But Michael Dowd makes their jobs harder. His legacy taints every interaction, creates suspicion, undermines legitimacy, makes it harder for good cops to build trust and solve crimes. That's the real cost of corruption, not just the direct harm from the crimes committed, but the systemic damage to the entire institution. the erosion of public trust, the poisoning of the relationship between police and community. Michael Dowd didn't just betray his oath. He betrayed every honest cop trying to do good work. He made their jobs harder. Their communities are less safe. Their relationships with citizens are more fraught. That's his true legacy, and it will last far longer than his prison sentence. Why did Michael Dowd become corrupt? What made him different from other officers who faced the same pressures and temptations but stayed honest? Was it something in his personality? Some fundamental lack of conscience or empathy? Was he always a criminal who just happened to become a cop? Or did the job change him? Did the stress and violence and constant exposure to the worst of humanity wear away his moral center? We don't really know. Dowd himself doesn't seem to know. He just did what he did, saw opportunities and took them, wanted money and found ways to get it, felt invincible and acted like it. But that's not really an answer. It doesn't explain why he was able to cross lines other officers wouldn't cross, why he felt no apparent remorse, why he was willing to risk everything for money and power. The truth is uncomfortable. Acknowledging it requires law enforcement to examine itself critically, to admit failure, to accept responsibility, to commit to genuine change. But until that happens, the cycle continues, and the communities that depend on police protection continue to suffer. At the end of his testimony before the Mullen Commission, Michael Dowd was asked one final question, a question that cuts to the heart of everything. Did you consider yourself to be a New York City cop or a drug trafficker? Dowd paused, then answered with chilling honesty. Both. I consider myself both a cop and a gangster. That's the truth of Michael Dowd. He didn't see himself as one or the other. He was both, simultaneously, without contradiction, without conflict. He wore the badge and broke the law, took the oath and violated it, protected criminals and was a criminal, served the institution and betrayed it. And in his mind, there was nothing wrong with that. No cognitive dissonance, no moral struggle. He was both things at once and saw no problem with it. That's the most disturbing part of this entire story. Not that Michael Dowd became corrupt, but he never saw it as corruption, never understood that what he was doing was wrong, never grasped the magnitude of his betrayal. He stole from innocent people and thought it was okay because they were criminals. He protected drug dealers and thought it was okay because he was making money. He violated his oath and thought it was okay because everyone else was doing it too. He never had a moment of conscience, never felt guilty, never wrestled with the morality of his actions. He just did what he wanted and justified it however he needed to. That's not a bad cop who made mistakes. That's not a good person who succumbed to temptation. That's a predator who found a job that gave him access to victims and authority to avoid consequences. Michael Dowd shouldn't have been a police officer. He should never have been given a badge and a gun and authority over other people. He was fundamentally unsuited for the responsibility. But the system let him in, trained him, protected him, enabled him, made it possible for him to destroy lives for years. And when he was finally caught, finally prosecuted, finally imprisoned, the system learned nothing. Nothing changed. Did nothing to prevent the next Michael Dowd from doing exactly the same thing. That's the real tragedy. Not that one corrupt cop existed, but that system made it possible, and continues to make others like him possible. Michael Dowd considered himself both a cop and a gangster. The real question is, why did the New York City Police Department agree with him? The badge is supposed to represent protection, service, justice. But Michael Dowd turned it into a weapon, a tool for exploitation, a shield against consequences, and the system protected him for years. This wasn't just one corrupt cop. This was an entire culture of silence. Supervisors who looked the other way, officers who stayed quiet, an institution that valued loyalty over integrity. The people of East New York deserved officers who would protect them. Instead, they got cops who robbed them, who helped drug dealers, who made everything worse. Michael Dowd eventually went to prison, but the culture that created him, it's still there, still protecting corrupt officers, still punishing whistleblowers, still operating in police departments across the country. That blue wall of silence still stands. And behind it, officers are making the same choices Michael Dowd made. Right now, in your city, in your community. This story didn't end with an arrest. It's still happening. The corruption continues. The betrayal continues. And until we break that code of silence, nothing will truly change. The bad should mean something. It should represent the best of us. But sometimes it represents the worst. And we need to face that truth honestly. If this story opened your eyes to the reality of police corruption, we need your help spreading the truth. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the stories that matter, the stories they don't want you to hear. Drop a comment below. Tell us what you think. Should there be stronger oversight of law enforcement? How do we break the blue wall of silence? Your voice matters in this conversation. Smash that like button if you believe accountability matters more than loyalty. If you believe the bad should actually mean something. And share this video. Share it with everyone you know. Because the truth about police corruption needs to be told. These stories need to be heard. And change only happens when enough people demand it. Subscribe, comment, like, share, turn on notifications. Because the next story we uncover might be even more shocking than this one. This is True Crime Vault, where we don't just tell stories. We expose the truth.